Everybody, Shannon Petrovich with Therapist Talks. Today we're going to talk about boundaries. Boundaries are the ever-changing, invisible, but critically important buffer zone between you and others. They're personal and profoundly important, and if there's one thing that I probably end up talking about at every therapy session with every client, it's boundaries. In this video, we'll talk about the most common boundary violations, how to stop them, how to take better care of yourself and your boundaries. I'm going to divide this into two parts. Today we'll talk more about emotional boundaries, and then the next video will be about physical and sexual boundaries. So remember the video on anger, the truth about anger no one wants to hear? The only legitimate anger is a boundary violation. So when someone invades your personal or emotional space, it's natural and normal for you to feel angry and to want to express it and to hold your boundaries. So if we look at horses, they're really interesting examples of how to set boundaries. And there's a saying in equine therapy circles, if I were more like a horse, I would have fewer problems. When I worked as an equine assisted therapist, I taught everyone to watch the horses and how they set boundaries with each other. They start off with a subtle look from across the arena, and usually that works and makes the horse that's violating boundaries step out of the way. If that doesn't work, a more stern look, maybe a swish of the tail, then a head toss, then maybe they lay their ears back and show their teeth. Eventually they might turn their hind end towards the offending horse, and if none of that works, there might be squeals, maybe a kick, and maybe a bite. But you can see that there are many, many steps and warning signs and a very gradual escalation from subtle to absolute. And that's what we want to aspire to in our own boundary setting. We want to have the ability to notice boundary violations at the most subtle point, address them in subtle ways, but also have the ability to escalate to fit a more serious violation. Often we can get our point across with just a disapproving look. Have you ever had someone flirting with you that you didn't want and you give them that look and it stops? Or if someone tells an off-color joke and you give them that look and they look sheepish and they quit. Of course, there are times when that doesn't have any impact, and you have to have an ability to have an escalation so that when someone doesn't heed those more subtle cues, you're going to assert yourself with more and more strength until you get your point across. One of the most important things to recognize is that about 85% of what we say to others is not about the words coming out of our mouths. Just like the horses, we have a ton of nonverbals that range from very subtle to very direct. Those include the tone of our voice. I can communicate friendliness to anger, to sarcasm, to sternness. The volume of my voice can be soft, firm, all the way up to yelling. The intensity of our eye contact or avoidance. And perhaps one of the most important things that's often missed is our spatial awareness. We can open ourselves up to others and we can close ourselves off. We can square our shoulders and stand tall, or we can look at the ground and look sheepish. We can create a sense of space around us by putting our hands out, turning away from someone, or turning towards them with a loud back off. There are many ways to use our nonverbals and verbals to communicate strength. So as I said in the beginning, there are different kinds of boundaries, and today we're going to address emotional boundaries. So people invade our emotional space frequently, and it's a truism that we teach others how to treat us. So people with poor boundaries often feel like it's okay to dump on others. And if we're willing to take on that mountain of emotional garbage from a person, they'll continue to do that to us. It's one thing to vent to a friend sometimes, but if it becomes constantly one way and it's always negative, there's never a solution orientation. If they feel they have the right to dump their anger, if we allow them to take in a relationship and never reciprocate in any way, we're allowing our emotional boundaries to be violated. If they feel their anger is always someone else's fault and they dump it on you when you're the closest person to them, if they criticize, nitpick, demand you to do things their way all the time, if they're mean and rude and untrustworthy and yet still want to be in your life, it's your responsibility to set an emotional boundary and keep them out. We have to care more for our own emotional well-being and keep that boundary with that person. I remember years ago working with a woman whose best friend kept being so hurtful, so untrustworthy, engaged in so much emotional dumping. There was never any reciprocity. And then she yelled at my client on the phone and that she was angry that my client wasn't there for her in some way that made no sense. I asked her, "Why are you friends with her?" And when she had no answer except that they'd been friends a long time, she realized that a friendship without trust or care or reciprocity or boundaries was not a friendship, but just a bad habit. She soon broke that habit and she felt a lot better. I had a client who had trouble with a coworker and felt bullied all the time. She tried to talk with him directly about it and then took it to the next level and brought it to the supervisor. She had to bring it up several times, and ultimately the supervisor saw it and made it stop. In the past, she would have been willing to let those things go, but as she got stronger in other areas of her life through therapy and boundary setting with others, she saw that boundary violation, it made her angry, and she shut it down. Many clients talk about setting boundaries with their parents. If your parents had poor boundaries when you were growing up, it may be so patterned that you don't even see how they violate your boundaries as an adult. But you have the right and responsibility to take care of yourself, and you can set boundaries with your parents. This often involves how they talk to you, how they demand or intrude, or how they treat you. Another common issue surrounds clients with adult children who still feel they have to field every demand from them and have to bail them out of every fix, from financial to legal and everything in between, or they take a lot of emotional abuse from them. I often tell my clients they're not helping their adult children grow up and learn to cope with life if they're treating them like children. They're emotionally handicapping them. With these parents or adult children, it may start with the look and then escalate to, "I don't appreciate you talking to me that way," or "When you can calm down, we can talk about this." It may escalate all the way to walking away, hanging up the phone. You don't need to take that kind of verbal intrusion or abuse. You may need to sit down with them and have a clear setting of boundaries, clarify it all in an email, and ultimately, if you cannot have a relationship with boundaries, you may need to end that relationship. So in summary, if you feel uncomfortable or angry in a situation, ask yourself if your boundaries are being violated. Are those physical or emotional? How big is the violation, and how do I match my reaction to that? What's my escalation plan? What's my exit plan? Ultimately, how will you take care of yourself in the future with that person, or do you need to disconnect from that person? The next video, like I said, we'll talk about physical and sexual boundary violations, and that's another big topic. If you found this video helpful, please hit like and subscribe. Leave me your thoughts in the comment section, ask questions, or make suggestions for future topics. And thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again soon.